The sun dipped low over Old San Juan. Cobblestones glowed in honeyed light. Elena Morales gripped her daughter's hand as they stepped out of the taxi. The salty breeze tangled dark curls across her cheek. For years, she had carried memories of this city like fragile glass, locked away in a box marked, "Never again." But here she was, returning, not for herself, but for the little girl skipping beside her. "Mami, mira!" Marisol tugged her hand, pointing at the pastel buildings glowing in the evening light. "It's like the houses are candy." Elena smiled despite the knot in her stomach. "Sí, mi amor, candy-colored, but older than you can imagine." Doña Rosa's home waited just ahead, its iron balcony wrapped in bougainvillea. The heavy front door opened before Elena could knock. Her aunt stood framed in the doorway, arms folded, lips pursed in a line sharp enough to cut stone. "So," Rosa said, "the prodigal returns. Titi." Elena lowered her gaze, fighting the urge to shrink. "May we come in?" Rosa's eyes softened only when they dropped to Marisol. "So this is the child." Marisol curtsied dramatically, making her skirt fan out. "Buenas tardes, señora. I like your flowers." For a moment, Rosa's stern mouth almost curved. Almost. "At least she has manners." She stepped aside. "Come in before the neighbors make their stories fatter than they already are." That night, after Marisol drifted to sleep, Elena sat across from her aunt at the dining table. The old woman poured 2 cups of bitter coffee. "You should have stayed where you were," Rosa said. "San Juan has not forgotten what you did." "What I did was protect my daughter." Elena's voice cracked, then softened again. "I couldn't let them take her." Rosa stirred her coffee, eyes sharp. Secrets have a way of crawling out of graves. 2 nights later, the plaza of San Jose overflowed with life. Lanterns swayed overhead. Musicians tuned their guitars. Couples whirled in bright skirts. Rosa insisted on dragging Elena out. "You cannot hide in my house like a ghost." Elena tried to blend into the crowd, but it was impossible. She was too polished, too elegant. She turned to keep Marisol in sight, her daughter chasing pigeons near the fountain. And then she froze. Across the plaza, by the steps of the church, stood a man she had once known better than her own heartbeat. Adrián Vega. His shoulders had broadened, his jaw sharper, but his eyes, those storm-dark eyes, hadn't changed. He was laughing with a group of businessmen, until his gaze lifted and locked onto hers. The music faltered in her ears. The years collapsed in an instant. "Elena." She didn't hear him speak, but she felt it across the cobblestones, like an echo only her soul could catch. Before she could turn, Marisol ran back, tugging her hand toward the churro vendor. Adrian's eyes flickered to the child, then back to Elena. Confusion furrowed his brow. "Elena," he said again, this time aloud, voice carrying across the plaza. She drew Marisol closer, heart pounding, 1,000 excuses rising like walls in her throat. "It's been a long time," he said, stepping closer, his smile careful, tinged with disbelief. "Too long." "Yes," she whispered, "too long." And before another word could pass, Valeria Cruz swept into the plaza, a crimson dress turning heads like flame. Her eyes landed on Adrian first, then slid to Elena, narrowing like a hawk's. "Elena Morales." Valeria purred, every syllable dripping with disdain. Well, well, some shadows never stay buried. The music struck up again, but the air had changed. The dance of Old San Juan was no longer carefree. It was the beginning of a storm. The next morning, Elena rose before dawn. She could not shake the memory of Adrian's voice saying her name. She stood at Rosa's balcony, watching the city stretch awake under a pale sky. Below, Marisol laughed with the neighbor's boy, already trading seashells like treasures. Rosa appeared beside her with a shawl. "You saw him." Elena didn't pretend not to know. "Yes. He is dangerous for you." Rosa's eyes narrowed at the horizon. "And for the child. Do not forget who his father is." Elena's hand curled around the balcony rail. She couldn't forget if she tried. That afternoon, fate conspired. Elena had taken Marisol to the plaza for piraguas, shaved ice glistening with tamarind syrup, when a familiar voice called out, "Elena." Adrián. He stood with a bag of fresh pan sobao, dressed in a simple white shirt that did nothing to diminish his authority. His smile was tentative, but warm. "You disappeared," he said softly, as Marisol darted ahead, chasing pigeons. "No word. No reason. And now you're here, as if the years meant nothing." Elena's throat tightened. The years meant everything. His gaze lingered on her, searching. "And that girl, she is your daughter?" "Yes." Elena's voice trembled. "Marisol." Marisol skipped back, cheeks sticky with syrup, and beamed up at Adrián. "Hola." Adrián crouched down, charmed despite himself. "Hola, pequeña. Do you like pigeons?" "They fly away too fast," she giggled, "but I'll catch one someday." He laughed, the sound full and genuine, and Elena's chest ached. Watching them together was like watching two halves of a secret collide, without knowing it. Meanwhile, in another corner of San Juan, Valeria Cruz sipped champagne at the Hotel El Convento terrace. Her lips curled as she scrolled through her phone. She had already set wheels in motion. A discreet investigator in Madrid was piecing together Elena's years abroad. If there was dirt to find, Valeria would find it, and bury Elena with it. "She thinks she can waltz back into San Juan with the child and steal Adrian's gaze," Valeria whispered to herself, her smile sharp as broken glass. "We'll see how long that lasts." Days stretched into weeks. Despite herself, Elena found Adrián at her side more often. At the book fair in Plaza de Armas, at the cafe overlooking the sea wall, even at Rosa's doorstep when he just happened to be nearby. Each time he asked more questions, each one closer to the truth. One evening, as the coqui frogs began their chorus, they walked together along the old city walls. The lantern light cast long shadows. Adrián stopped, facing her fully. "Elena, why did you leave?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. The truth clawed at her throat. "Because your father threatened to take Marisol from me, because I was terrified." But she shook her head, eyes glistening. "I can't explain." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then at least tell me this. Is there still something between us?" The space between them hummed with all the years they had lost, and for a single heartbeat, the lost years between them vanished. She wanted to deny it, but the tears in her eyes betrayed her. "Yes," she whispered, and when he kissed her, the world tilted back into place, if only for that moment. But not all eyes were blind. From a distance, Valeria watched, hidden in the shadows of a cafe awning. She pulled out her phone, snapping a photo of their embrace. "Perfect," she hissed. "Now let the games begin." The following weekend, Adrián invited Elena and Marisol to a charity event at the Vega Foundation's gallery. Elena resisted, but Marisol begged to see the paintings, so she relented. Inside, Marisol wandered from canvas to canvas, wide-eyed. Adrián trailed behind her, smiling as if he had known her all his life. At one painting, a storm over El Yunque rainforest, Marisol slipped her hand into his without hesitation. Elena froze, her heart in her throat. Adrián glanced down at the small fingers wrapped around his own, then up at Elena. Something unspoken passed between them. Her laugh, Adrián murmured, almost to himself. It reminds me of when I was a boy. Elena's breath caught. In what way? He smiled, eyes still on Marisol. The same spark, as if the world is hers for the taking. Elena forced herself to look away, but her heart drummed against her ribs. That evening, when the house had fallen into silence, Elena sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold. The only light came from a small lamp, its glow catching on the crucifix above the doorway. Rosa shuffled in, her night shawl wrapped tight. She fixed her with a look that cut through the shadows. You've walked back into San Juan carrying secrets, Niña. Sooner or later, they'll demand their price. Elena's fingers tightened on the porcelain cup. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then her voice spilled out, low and uneven. In Madrid, I was a stranger. The language was mine, but the streets were not, and every face turned away as if I were invisible. I carried Marisol beneath my heart while carrying trays in a cafe, wiping tables with one hand pressed against my back because the pain never left me. There were nights I slept sitting upright, afraid that if I lay down, the world would crush me. Her breath caught, but she pressed on. But I learned. I worked. I painted when I had the strength, sold sketches to tourists in the plazas. I studied when Marisol slept, taught myself enough to earn a position at a small gallery. Little by little, I built a life from nothing. They whispered that I had disappeared in shame, but in truth I was fighting to rise, to give my daughter a childhood full of love, though in my heart I always wondered what our lives might have been, here in Puerto Rico, with Adrián by our side. Rosa's stern eyes softened, though her voice stayed sharp. And yet you still hide it from him. Elena stared into her cup, her reflection rippling with every tremor of her hand. If he knew what his father did, what it cost us both, I don't know if he could forgive it or forgive me. Rosa leaned forward, laying her hand gently over Elena's. The truth always comes, Niña. Better it comes from your lips than from your enemies. Meanwhile, Valeria's investigator delivered a slim folder of documents. Elena's life in Madrid, the small apartment, the hospital records, proof of a birth, 7 years ago. Valeria traced her finger down the page with a predator's satisfaction. So, the child is the secret. She snapped the folder shut. And at the gala, I'll make sure it doesn't stay hidden. The following Sunday, bells tolled over San Juan Bautista Cathedral. The congregation spilled into the plaza. Marisol ran to Adrián, clutching his hand, her laughter bright as the chimes. Elena froze. In that instant, with the sun blazing down, the resemblance between them was undeniable. Eyes, smile, spark. Elena, Adrián whispered, voice breaking as he looked at her over Marisol's head. Tell me, is she mine? Her breath shattered in her chest. She wanted to scream yes, to tear down the walls of fear. But the words lodged like stone in her throat. And in the distance, Valeria's laughter rang soft and cruel, a herald of the storm to come. The night of the gala arrived with 1,000 glittering lights strung across the gardens of the Vega estate. San Juan's elite streamed through wrought iron gates. Gowns brushed the marble steps. Men in suits clinked glasses of champagne. Music swelled from a string quartet, polite, polished, masking the storm beneath. Elena smoothed Marisol's hair, her heart hammering as she followed Titi Rosa into the crowd. She had wanted to stay away, but refusing would have fueled whispers. Better to face them head-on, even if every instinct screamed to run. "Hold your head high," Rosa whispered. "If you bow, they'll eat you alive." Across the terrace, Adrian spotted her instantly, his eyes lit with warmth. Not just the warmth of a love lost, but of a future glimpsed. He crossed the floor in 3 strides, bowed his head close to hers. "You came," he said softly. "You invited me," she answered, though her voice trembled. Marisol tugged Adrian's sleeve, her face alight. "They have a fountain inside. Can we see?" He smiled down at her, his hand brushing hers unconsciously, and Elena's chest clenched, joy and fear tangled tight. At the far end of the terrace, Valeria watched like a queen surveying her stage. The slim folder rested in her clutch. She had rehearsed this moment, savored it, dreamed of the ruin she would deliver. Tonight, Elena would burn. Don Ernesto Vega entered with regal calm, silver hair slicked, presence commanding silence. He raised a glass. The chatter fell away. "Tonight," he declared, "we celebrate tradition, honor, and the legacy of our family name." His eyes swept the crowd, hard as stone. "And that legacy will continue with my son Adrian and the future we have planned for him." Whispers rippled. Some glanced toward Valeria, others toward Elena. Adrian's jaw tightened. Before he could speak, Valeria's heels clicked onto the dais. She slid a paper from her clutch, raised it high. "Honor," she purred. "Then let us speak of truth." The crowd hushed. This woman, Elena Morales, vanished from Puerto Rico 7 years ago under a cloud of shame, and now she returns with the child she calls her daughter. But whose child is she really? Gasps cut through the night. Cameras flashed. Valeria's eyes gleamed as she dropped the hospital record onto the table. Marisol Morales, born in Madrid 7 years ago, conceived before Elena's disappearance, and if you look closely, she turned, her voice sharp as glass. "The resemblance to Adrián Vega cannot be denied." The crowd erupted, shocked cries, whispers, scandal spilling like wine. Adrian froze. His eyes snapped to Elena, then to Marisol. His chest rose and fell, the truth crashing in like a tide. "Elena," he whispered, hoarse, "tell me, is it true?" Her knees shook. She wanted to flee, but Marisol's small hand clutched hers like an anchor. She lifted her chin, tears spilling freely. "Yes," her voice trembling but strong. "She is yours. I left because your father threatened to take her from me. He told me if I stayed, he would claim my baby, give her another name, another family, and erase me as if I had never existed. I chose exile over losing my daughter." Gasps struck the crowd like thunder. Don Ernesto slammed his glass onto the table. Crystal shattered. "Mentiras," he roared. "Lies to cover her shame." But Adrian stepped forward, fury and anguish blazing in his eyes. "You would have stolen my child from me." From her mother? Valeria, seeing her triumph slip, snapped her clutch shut and stormed from the terrace. Her heels struck the marble like gunshots. As the crowd dispersed, Don Ernesto remained by the shattered glass. His shoulders slumped under a weight no one else could see. For the first time in his long life, the great patriarch looked small. He watched Elena with Marisol in her arms, Adrian's hand steady on their backs. His lips trembled as he spoke. too soft for the guests, but clear enough for his son. I thought I was protecting our name, but I only destroyed what mattered. Forgive me, Hijo. Forgive me. Elena. Elena met his gaze across the terrace. For a heartbeat, she saw not the tyrant who once threatened her, but a man who had spent his life chasing honor and found only emptiness. She gave him a small, silent nod, not absolution, but acknowledgement. Adrián exhaled, his eyes burning. Your pride stole 7 years from me, Papa. 7 years with my daughter, and with your granddaughter. That can never be returned. Don Ernesto bowed his head, then lifted it again, eyes damp. His voice cracked, stripped of command. Let me earn the right to know her, to be a grandfather, if she will have me. Elena's arms tightened around Marisol. For a moment she wavered, torn between old wounds and the fragile chance of healing. Adrián's hand brushed hers, steadying her. She will know you, Adrián said carefully, but on our terms, not yours. If you wish to be part of her life, you must walk in truth from this day forward. Ernesto swallowed hard and nodded. For the first time, he seemed not like a patriarch demanding loyalty, but a man asking for a place at the table of his own family. By morning, San Juan hummed with scandal. The story of Valeria's failed spectacle raced through every terrace, cafe, and parlor. Former friends refused her calls, business partners withdrew, and the city that once bowed to her elegance turned its back in disdain. Within weeks, Valeria abandoned her penthouse in Condado and slipped away to the quieter coasts of Ponce. There, far from the society that had once crowned her, she walked streets where no one cared for her gowns or her schemes. San Juan had cast her out, and for Valeria Cruz, exile was the cruelest fate of all. In the silence that followed, Adrián turned to Elena, his voice breaking with tenderness. You carried this alone all these years. I should have been there. Elena's tears fell freely now. I was afraid of losing her, afraid of losing you. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. You will never lose me again. Marisol squeezed their hands together, beaming with the simple wisdom of a child. So, we're a family now. Elena laughed through her tears. Adrián bent to kiss his daughter's forehead. Yes, pequeña, always. Later, as dawn broke over San Juan, the family gathered outside the terrace. The music and gossip had faded, leaving only the sound of waves against the wall. Marisol tugged her mother's hand, then her father's, pulling them together in a circle. When she spotted Ernesto lingering at a distance, hesitant, she surprised them all by running to him. Abuelito, she said softly, the word new on her lips. Come. The old man's eyes brimmed as he stepped forward, slowly, carefully. He joined the circle, his hand trembling as it closed over hers. And so they stood, mother, father, daughter, and grandfather, fragile but whole, bathed in the first light of morning. Titi Rosa watched from the doorway, her eyes glistening as she whispered, At last, the past has no more shadows.